Welcome to the second episode of PKM for Research live commentary. Some people, they watch sports commentary. What are the good tactics? What did the player do well? Or how could the player improve the game? So in this live commentary, our game is PKM, Personal Knowledge Management for Research. My name is Bianca Pereira, and I will be your host today. I'm a PKM coach and a researcher, and as any researcher, a knowledge creator. We consume knowledge, we play with knowledge, we experiment and generate new knowledge. So, knowledge management is not just a need, but a must to any researcher. And yet, we talk so little about it, right? So, why not have a space where you can actually chat about personal knowledge management? So, we started in Twitter space, but there are times when you really need to do some screen sharing. So, here we are, PKM for Research live stream. And today, I have the pleasure to have here as my co-host Yalcin Arsan. Yalcin is a strategic business consultant and a PKM coach. And hello, Yalcin, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, Bianca. Thank you for inviting me.
Could you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and your experience with PKM?
Yes, thank you. As a strategic management consultant, I work with big companies. I help them develop, grow, sometimes get smaller, acquire each other, and build strategies for the future, which requires a lot of information, a lot of knowledge. And this, in turn, requires a system to manage this knowledge, information. And I think that's why we're here together.
Oh, that's great. Thanks a lot. So, just to explain to everyone else what we are doing here today, what we call is live commentary. So, the idea is that we'll be watching together a recording of someone else walk through to their PKM, their showcase their PKM system, the personal knowledge management system, and we'll be commenting and giving maybe suggestions on the system itself. So, how can anyone engage? So when I say we will be giving comments and giving suggestions, by we, I mean also you who are joining us live. Although we are the ones here on the screen, we also would like to hear ideas. So if you are watching us on Twitter, feel free to tweet us your ideas at any moment. And if you are watching us on YouTube, just add your thoughts in the chat area. So we'll be keeping track of that as we go along. So let's get started. Today, we'll be watching a video sent us by Felipe Fraga. And Felipe Fraga is a master student in the topic of artificial intelligence with particular interest on natural language processing and PKM. Felipe's PKM is an integration of multiple tools like Roam and Notion and tasks as well. And today, Felipe will be talking about tracking tasks for research projects and how to organize notes to make it easier to write a dissertation. So I want to ask you, Yalcin, are you ready to start?
Yes, very much so. Looking forward to see Felipe's PKM system.
That's great. So before we start with the walkthrough, let's hear as Felipe talks about what are his PKM goals.
Hello and welcome. My name is Felipe, and I'm also known as Fraga. And today I'm going to give a quick demonstration on my personal knowledge management system and some of the struggles that I have, some of the challenges and ways that I've tried to overcome them and how I'm doing right now. So let's get straight into this. These are the three themes I'm going to talk about. And this is the diagram that best represents how my personal knowledge management system works. So for me, personal knowledge management in a general way is about supporting me in having a great life or in being better in life. So this diagram, the Life OS system, represents different systems in life, and the PKM systems represent the different elements of PKM, which are the life management system and the redirecting system. And these systems are going to be present within and in between these different areas of life, these different systems of life.
Here, I really like how Felipe, for example, names his whole system as his Life OS or Life Operative System. So I was thinking, like, if we plan to really spend a lot of time with our knowledge systems, let's say with our knowledge, it's always good to have a name to our PKM that is meaningful to us. And I was thinking, like, what about you, Yalcin? Have you ever considered giving a name to your PKM system?
No, not really, but I like the idea. I like especially life operating system. It's kind of soft, having the life in itself, but also technical, like operating system. It's a fusion between the softness of life as well as the organization of a system operating. So I like the idea, but I didn't use it as yet.
Oh, that's nice. I have always been thinking about a name for my whole system, and I couldn't. So I just came with the idea of the home, which I like my knowledge and the things I like, and the barracks, which a little bit of this action management, let's say. And if you think here on the how Philip seems to be presenting, it's very similar. Let's say the home is the knowledge management part of his life management system, and the barracks is the action management.
Yes,
I found
yes.
that
I
very
think he's using multiple tools now here. We can see on the left-hand side is the Rome research, if I'm not mistaken, and the right-hand side is the Notions page.
Yes. So let's just maybe like keep watching to see what you tell us more.
So, yeah, let's go. I have two major comments to begin with about this Life OS system diagram. The three, actually. The first one is that having a better life basically equates to having a greater outcome and contribution. And this will come from how all of the other systems interact with each other. So the first clear component that is responsible for that, and this leads me into the second major point about this diagram, are the behaviors and habits. And this is important because our behaviors and habits are the major bottleneck for our outcome, because they are basically where our outcome comes from. And they are kind of the middle ground that puts together all of the different systems in life, and from how we behave and act, that's where our outcome is going to happen. So this is the second point. And the third major point is that literally everything comes from our thoughts. So our thoughts create our reality, and how this diagram represents this is that everything originates from our thoughts. So all of the systems, our vision, our goals, our emotions, behaviors, our health, and our environment, all of them are shaped by our thoughts. So this is absolutely relevant for how I look at personal knowledge management.
Bianca, I think you're muted.
Thank you very much. What I find really interesting here is that Philippe, he took the time to draw a diagram to represent his way of thinking. And I think it must give a lot of clarity when it comes to building the PKM, the system itself, and see which part will be used to organize each of those areas. And I found that it's also important when you do that to allow ourselves to review the diagram from time to time. So is it really the way we perceive things? And let's say after 2, 3, 5 years, and it seems Philippe is on that as well with this his redirecting system of review and development. So for me, at least so far, I can see some very good practices here. And I would like to know, like, what do you think, Yalcin?
Yes, I also agree. Having a drawing gives clarity of mind. It helps you visualize the context that you're talking about. As we previously discussed, I think he's more inclined to use multiple tools. Rome research obviously is the more hierarchical or more outliner style PKM tool. Notion can be used as much more visual. I think what Felipe is trying to do is to use both tools to have some kind of a balance of visuality as well as written and hierarchical outliner content, which is, I think, nice. Sometimes I feel myself also trying to do some kind of drawing or visual style, but my preference is more like going into the single tool. But I cannot deny the benefit of using both, Bianca.
Yeah, and for me as well, like I find, as you said, like having the diagram, the ability to include diagrams, sometimes just as an image, but sometimes as a way even to navigate is very good. And even, for example, when you have a diagram that you say, this is my way of thinking, and then you can actually dive into notes, for example, for that. Because here is a diagram, and if Felipe is explaining, but what if like I want to that square to actually be a note where I can remind myself how I deal with that part of my PKM. So that's a very, very interesting thing.
There is a small risk here, though,
yes.
Bianca. When you are trying to envision the whole context, you are running into a risk of trying to do too much sometimes. Like, if Felipe was only focused on the right-hand side, outcome and contribution part, his job was much easier. However, when he tries to visualize the whole system, this is a much bigger task, because every time you add some kind of a vision, you realize that there is another one to add, and then there is another one to add. There is a bigger picture that affects the whole picture. So if you keep on doing this, you may end up exhausting yourself with really large systems that are trying to cover everything. Then that may be, if you're, again, this is not a big risk, but if you're not aware, if you're not really cautious, you can run into trying to do too much in too little time.
Yeah, so basically one step at a time, right? One step at a time. Yeah. And as we talk about Felipe's tools, let's finally hear about what are the tools that Felipe uses.
I'm going to show how I use different tools to take care of different systems in life, and also how each of these PKM systems are present in each of the tools. So let's get into it. The first and most important tool for me is Rome Research. It's my central system that controls all of the other tools, and yeah, it's my major second brain where I think a lot. So it's basically the biggest and most important thing I do in Rome is thinking. So it's taking care of my thoughts and my beliefs, and this happens by journaling a lot. And from journaling and having clarity in what I want to do, all of the other things come into place. So Rome is the central brain. Notion is where I've been visualizing my vision, my goals, and also creating, so sharing my creations with others. And Things is where my behaviors and digital environment are most being influenced by. So this is where my action part comes in. And the notes are basically a quick capture function, which if I click over here, I can open a new note and capture anything. But yeah, that's basically what I do in notes. And from the rest, in Rome, Notion, and Things, I'm gonna give a quick glance into how I use each of these three apps.
Yeah, and I find here there is another very good practice for who is new to PKM, which is the idea of like mapping out our own workflows. As I say, like before he mapped his view, but now he's really mapping for what I use each tool and how they connect to each other. So it also reminds me of TFT Hacker on Twitter, who is always promoting for everyone to share a diagram with their own PKM workflow. So like even to invite, if you are watching this today, Think about drawing a diagram, can be even on paper, a diagram of how your PKM workflow works, because sometimes just by doing that, we can learn a lot about our own way of thinking, our own way of work, and how to actually improve that. And here, Felipe, for example, try to focus on using the best tool for each job, because unfortunately we still don't have, I think, the one tool that works for everything, right?
Exactly. I think Felipe is quite an advanced user in the sense that he has chosen 1, 2, 3, 4 different tools to complement the whole system, to build, to make up the whole system. Each one of them are really very competent tools, I can say. And if you don't mind using many tools, I think this is a very well thought out, very good planned, very well planned system to take care of what Felipe is trying to do, his dissertation. I'm eager to see how he is doing with it and what challenges he's facing.
Let's continue with that.
So basically, Rome is very important for knowledge management about my thoughts and about any knowledge regarding any project. So that's where knowledge management is going to happen. And most important, actually, is where I'm going to think about my vision and my goals. So this is a very important part of Rome. And this is how I would do it. So I have a plan, a page for this year's plan, where I start with the transformative purpose, which is something I got from building a second brain cohort. If I jump to block, this is an idea by Glenn Lubert, which was one of the mentors. So this was done elsewhere, and then I basically linked it back into this year's plan. And that's after that, I would basically outline some areas of priority for this year, or for kind of the future ahead, and bulk it into a short-term plan. So basically start with a long-term plan for the year, and then the quarterly plans and monthly plans, and also this is where the thinking goes on. And in Notion, it's where I'm actually visualizing my plans and my goals, because I can access it easier from my iPhone, from my iPad, and it's a better user interface in general. So it's easier to see my objectives and all.
Yeah, here I just stop it because I think that's one thing that is important for the purpose of research. That I believe that having a vision is really important in research, because in fact you cannot create a research gap if you don't envision how you want the future to be. So which knowledge do you want to create, so that we know which knowledge is actually missing, right? Or what is the gap, So I need to envision what's the future, where the knowledge is now that we saw in the literature, and then the difference between those is the research gap that we actually are trying to solve with our own research. Felipe calls it here his transformative purpose, as he wrote in Notion, which I believe is a way to say which transformation do I want to create in my life, or what is my envisaged outcome. Just want to point that out. That's very, very important for research. And Yalcin, as a consultant to business, for example, vision is also a very important aspect of businesses. So do you have any thoughts about how Felipe tracks and uses visions and goals? Yeah? Any overall comments?
I think I agree with you. As I said, I've never written a dissertation as such. I have done some papers in my university degrees, but dissertation is a very complex process. So having an end goal, a vision is I'm sure it's critically important. In my context, like a business environment, you may be trying to assess the situation you're in, or you may be trying to make a critical decision for your business. So a vision is equally important, only in a different context. I think the situation is very similar in the academic context as well as the business context. The odds are different, and what the tools you are using is different. The cost is also obviously very different. In a business environment, you are always in a financial risk situation. So I think they have both similar ways and in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I work with academia industry collaboration, and having a shared vision or what is the goal that you are trying to achieve is one of the key factors in if the collaboration will succeed or not. Because how good we are in actually communicating what is the purpose is something that can make a project work, or maybe it doesn't work at all. Because when I arrive at the end, some people say, yeah, we achieved it, and some people say, no, we didn't achieve it, because we need really to have this, what is the goal, what's the outcome that you want to have, and hopefully align with a higher vision, right?
Yeah, I like two things from Felipe's comments. One of them was he defined where the bottleneck is for him. This is especially important for me because this is an analysis that we always try to do with businesses. Where are you running low on resources? And what Felipe did was his bottleneck was behavior and habits. So in order to produce his results, he believed that there's a bottleneck that prevents him maybe to get the results that he is trying to do. That was really encouraging. I'm sure that if he sticks to this, if he sticks in his effort to resolve this bottleneck, I'm sure he'll succeed in that. Also, what I realized was he knows his tools, Felipe. He says he positioned Notion as a visualization tool, where he said that Rome was his thinking environment. He said Rome is when the thinking happens. So I also like the way he approaches this. It's very for a PKM expert or PKM enthusiast to build his system. It's very important that he knows his tools quite good.
And it really comes out from like, okay, I drew my diagram, so I actually know where the bottleneck is. So I wonder, like, if you don't actually take the time to reflect on that and even do some type of draw or some type of reflection, if you can actually achieve that. So I so agree with you, and that's really good. And there was also another thing that called my attention in his screen, but he didn't talk about. So I maybe just pop his screen here again. Oh, too small. He talks about sprint. For example, you can see like July sprint 1. And so I note he may work on sprints. And for who doesn't know, sprints comes from agile software development. It's suitable for areas of high uncertainty where you don't really know how the final software will be. The context in which the software applied will be changing all the time. And when it comes to research, I like to say that in research, we are always swimming in a sea of uncertainty, right? So using Agile may be a very good way to work with research tasks, because the requirements for our research work, the work that we are doing may change super fast, either because we learned something new that impacted everything that we are doing. Let's say we just read a paper that changed everything. I don't know, some people may have faced that a few times already, or because the content in which the work is being done has required us to adapt. Let's say you have planned a field trip for your research and suddenly COVID came out and stopped the whole world, or a funding that you were expecting didn't get approved. So I find it interesting that he's working with sprints. So we'll talk a little bit later about productivity, so that may comes, we can maybe talk a little bit more about that. So maybe just start and see what else Felipe has to show to us.
So what else do I do in Rome? Yeah, so in Rome, I'm going to have my daily notes page where I have kind of an important things that I have to get done today. This is what I'm doing right now. And a place for a log where I'm going to do an interstitial journaling on the tasks that I do, a place for journaling. So this is already getting into the behaviors and habits. And so I think this is a good time to bring things over, and that's the kind of the major function of things for me. So it's basically a behavior management and a project management for me, with the centerpiece being my behavior. Because if my behaviors are aligned, and if I'm doing the right behaviors every day, the rest will fall into place. So it's a place for recurring actions, things that I do every day, kind of my morning routine, my pre-game routine to get into flow, nightly routine, recurring tasks and all, affirmations, and then also the project. So it's a place where I kind of have the projects that are in my radar right now, with tasks for each of them in a dedicated place. I was doing all of that in Rome before. I have a projects page here, but I mean, Rome is not great with tasks. So I wanted a place where I could see all of the tasks, and things has been pretty good for me in that aspect. But I still have most of the knowledge for each project over here. So it's in a good part, the projects are linked in a way, and literally linked also, because I have a page, a link where if I click on the link, I'm gonna open the Rome page for that project. So that's a good thing for me. And yeah, I think regarding how I use my system, that's about it. So basically, Rome is the central brain. Notion is where I like to see and share things, and things is where I take care of my daily behaviors and my digital environment. And
yeah, I stopped it here. Just I think one of the interesting things that I could see here, and I'm not talking much about the habits and the task itself, but is the one ability of modern tools that we're talking about is that even when you don't have one tool yet that you can do everything, the tools are becoming more easier to integrate by having links. And links is a very, very powerful thing, because it can put things in different applications into the same context. So that's something I found really interesting that Felipe is using here as well.
Yes, combining things with Rome in terms of the task management is a very clever way to use these two strong, powerful tools together. I agree.
So let's see what else.
so for Notion, I think we're good right now, because the rest of my demonstration is going to take place in Rome mainly. So let's get into this. Just gonna mention a couple of other things that I do here in Rome, which is writing and having my Zettelkasten organized. So I have my Zettelkasten using a block-based Zettelkasten with a link to its page. And I use kind of clusters of nodes, which are called the galaxies, and each independent node is a star. And I have an inbox for that, where I come up with ideas. And I have a place for writing and creating, where I will capture some of my ideas as well. And yeah, but that's actually not my major goal right now. So I'm just gonna pass through it, because my major goal is actually this, my master's dissertation. So this brings me to my major struggle and what I want some guidance with. I actually have some notes over here about what is it that I'm struggling with. I think it's gonna be best to have a visual understanding of kind of the different components here. Okay, so basically my master's thesis is what I'm struggling with right now, and kind of having a sense of how I'm going to organize my PKM to do it. So I separated my struggle into two major parts, which are the tasks and the knowledge. So regarding the tasks, it's basically this kind of how will I organize my tasks for a massive project or a masterpiece? Because as we all know, a masterpiece is a big thing. So I tried several different things before, and I'm gonna show you like real quick how I tried these and where I'm at right now. And then I'll come back to the knowledge part and what's being a challenge for me in this sense. So let's come back here, and regarding my tasks, I started out using the work breakdown schedule where I had everything here inside this mix. And it's a project management concept. And here I would basically include all of the tasks that I had, and I would filter them out using the done. I actually want this out, and I would basically track things over here. But this got daunting. This got like too much to take care of. So I stopped using that, and I went into these individual projects inside my my main thesis page, which is dissertation, thesis. It's kind of a equivalent, not exactly, but it's kind of switched in Portuguese. But so I would basically use these projects to capture notes here by tagging them and organizing the tasks in here. But I stopped using it for the tasks, so right now I'm using things for the tasks, and so I'll basically be working on them side by side. And in Rome I will have my ideas and the links that I have collected, and here on things I'm gonna kind of plan and write down the tasks for each of the sub projects. So writing my dissertation is another project, so I have them equivalent in each place. So here I will have kind of the contents. This is where I'm actually writing things down. So things are gonna be linked from one place to another. And right now I think this is the best option for me. I'm not totally sure, but it seems like it. So this is my first struggle. It's regarding the tasks. So I think this is the best way to do it, but I'm not sure. I will take any suggestions on that.
You're on mute, Bianca.
I should stop muting myself. I think there's a lot we can talk about there. So I want to know, like, do you have any general thoughts before?
Yeah, I think this is where it begins to get really, really complicated, Bianca. Don't you think? It's until now, we have seen his system from the eyes of the creator of the system. Very clean, very nice. But now he's facing a huge challenge, huge task of writing his dissertation thesis, which is a really, really complex project in itself. It's like a company trying to make a decision to merge with another company. So there are so many variables, so many things to consider, etc. Like a business decision, and somebody's trying to work this out. So as much as clean the system is in the way Felipe has planned it, like Rome is the thinking space, things is the action space. Now that he has to use the two together, there is always a friction because you are using two tools. Mm-hmm. There's no easy answer to this. I mean, it's I think a challenging task, but if I am forced to make a suggestion, I would try to use a single tool for both of these tasks, like managing the organization and making the decisions and acting. Because even in our minds, I'm not really sure if one part of the mind focuses on the information alone, and then another part of the mind makes the decision. I don't think there is a distinction between. So probably trying to find a way to force these things to work together can be an option for Felipe.
That's interesting, because I'm on the opposite team, let's say. I am on the team of like the best tool for the job. But at the same time, I agree with you in the sense, like, you're coming from these ideas that at the moment that I need to act on that information, in which tool should I go, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like at the end becomes like, okay, I need to somehow have a different frame of mind. For example, I find, at least for me, I wouldn't suggest, let's say, but that's something that works for me. And it seems to be what Felipe is doing now. So I would agree with him. Is that, for example, when I'm in action mode, let's say I want to know what I need to do now. Then I go into the tool that I have for managing my actions, which ideally is a tool that has all the support for managing actions. And then the information, the knowledge itself becomes like, what are the support and knowledge that I need to execute a task. But then on the other side, most of those tasks are actually to create knowledge, because you are doing research. So then if the task creates knowledge, you are always actually jumping back and working on the knowledge side of things. And then whatever you're creating, if you're creating based on ideas, how can you actually link back? If those are different tools, how can you actually link back? So a few people have used tools that can connect tools. Let's say there is I think it's Hook for Mac, for example, where you can actually link to. I never use it. I want to put my hands on that, but I still didn't use. But that's maybe one way where you can bridge this gap. But I would say, so far, I would agree with the way how Felipe is doing. But I also see, like, your point, there is a drawback there. Especially if the task is actually creating knowledge, how can you link back the knowledge, the notes with the knowledge that I have created back to the task, so that if you need to revisit or review the task in the future, we actually know which notes are related to that, right? So I see it.
I think if Felipe is comfortable thinking in Rome and making the decisions in things, we don't have anything against this. But I hear in his voice that he is striving for another alternative, which, because he's using Rome, I don't know if he's aware of the concept of namespaces in Rome. I'm not a Rome user, but I'm a Logseq user, which is basically the same thing. There is a concept called namespaces, which allows certain pages to be descendant of each other, with a child and parent relationship. I think in Felipe's case, he can try to use namespaces to differentiate between the tasks that are knowledge and writing tasks, and the tasks that belong to coding, for example, like giving them separate namespaces. Do you remember in the presentation, in one place, he actually tried to do this, where he had a long list of options, and he was trying to filter by the tasks doing based on their status of done, doing, etc. This is similar to that, but more inherent function of outliners, namespaces. I don't know if we will have a chance to exchange maybe a few ideas after this presentation with Felipe, but I strongly suggest him to look in the context of namespaces, especially because he is using Rome. I think there may be more to it than meets the eye at first glance for his use case.
Yeah, so it's interesting to add the context of each action, as you say, like it's coding, it's knowledge generation, is maybe writing. And I think there is also another, it's something that is not on the tool side, it's more on the, let's say, I like to say the mindset, or more in the methodology side. Because, for example, Felipe is trying to think what is the best methodology to manage a research project. And he talks, for example, about WBS. So WBS, for who doesn't know, is a work breakdown structure. And the idea, if you have ever worked on a collaborative research project or a big research project, on a proposal, for example, you get the whole project and you break down into work packages. And there are a few people who are responsible for those work packages. And then each work package, you break down again into, for example, deliverable or milestones. And usually the proposal stops there, okay? So we still don't know what are all the tasks that needs to be done. And sometimes, and to be honest, due to the situation of research, the uncertainty of research, we may actually not know what all the tasks are, okay? So that's where I think that feeling that Felipe have is coming from, because it's the uncertainty of what the tasks are. So WBS works up to a point, up to the deliverable part, but it doesn't work very well on the task side. And even in the case of a research dissertation or a master thesis, where the whole topic of the research is evolving itself, it's hard even like to say, well, this was my deliverable, but the scope of the delivery is more or less that. Is not exactly that anymore. It changed a little bit with the new knowledge that I have acquired. So, and that's where I think Agile enters in. That's Felipe, when I was talking about sprints, for example, that's where it comes from, this idea of Agile, because then we have, when you come into the breakdown, when you arrive at the deliverables may even be broken further, and that becomes the backlog in the Agile. So I know that I need to work on all those things, or is our infinite to-do list of ideas I would like to explore in research, of things we would like to do. And then we work on sprints, let's say in 2 weeks or 1 week or 2 weeks, like what are those projects that are still valid, you know? And then I will break it down, okay, what are all the steps that I need to do? And then even the knowledge that I create by then will influence the projects in the backlog as well. So I think it's about the tools themselves for the actions, but it's also a little bit about the methodology. How can you actually have a methodology, a project management methodology that works for research when there is a high level of uncertainty in what we are doing? So we are not really totally able to know what are the specific tasks that we can do to complete the whole project. And it's not just about the writing itself, because we'll see, like Felipe talked a lot about writing dissertation, but it's about creating the knowledge that goes into writing the dissertation. So I think like there is also a little bit of this thing at the back of the mind as well.
Very good point.
Yeah, I have just one more point maybe to talk about. That's what I have a lot to talk about at this part that he discussed. And I think one point that I want to drive home, like for everyone who is watching, who is doing research, which I think is the most important thing when we talk about writing a thesis or a dissertation or even a paper, is that a dissertation is not about writing, okay? A dissertation is about creating an argument. A dissertation is about creating an argument, which, by the way, will be communicated through writing, but could be a presentation, could be multiple other ways. So what I mean is that the process of knowledge creation and dissemination is about creating a strong argument. Okay, so when we break down the dissertation or the thesis as a project, I like to think in terms of what knowledge do I need to create, okay, and then break that down into other small projects, okay, that could become part of the backlog, for example. And then we also have the writing, which at the end, okay, create the argument, and then now let me write the argument, write it as a paragraph. But then the argument is what matters, okay. So we can talk a little bit more about that when we are reviewing. We review Felipe's next question. Yeah. So I don't know, Yalcin, do you have something else you want to add, or?
No, let's keep on rolling.
Okay, let's go then.
And this brings us to the knowledge part, kind of like how can I organize my knowledge to work on my thesis. So I have two big buckets, which are writing the thesis and coding the thesis. So here I have knowledge management as into actually thinking and writing and putting ideas in, and here it's a knowledge management more as in kind of materials, links and tutorials and reflections as to what I have to do. So for the writing part, I'm pretty sure I will create a new Rome database for my thesis where I can use the graph view with the relevant information, because the way it is right now, it's just infinite little dots with pages and links, and I cannot understand and I cannot visualize anything basically, and I won't click it because of the load time. And so this brings me to kind of like, what should I bring over? I have
I think it's important for us to stop a little bit before talking about like what comes. Should I have a new vault? Should I have a new database? Should I have a new graph? Should I work on the same graph? I think there are a few things that we need to talk before. Maybe I'll start because I was talking. Let's say I've been thinking a lot about argumentation, as I was saying before. These days, as I'm preparing the content for my upcoming course on PKM for research. So the way how I see it is that there are claims, which are premises or conclusions of an argument, and there is supporting evidence who make these claims strong or not. Okay. So then the supporting material make claims stronger by what we call assuring. Okay. So that means I will not argue why this claim is true, but I can assure you that the claim is true. And I will do that by pointing to a bunch of people who have already argued or demonstrated the claim is very likely to be true. What we do, we reference paper. We say, well, this paper here, this person said this and that, so we can say that it's very likely that this is true. And our coding, experiment, or study of primary sources make claims stronger by adding supporting evidence. Okay, so we use the data the codes, the things that we have been doing. We use the data to make the argument that a given claim is very likely to be the case. Okay, so then when it comes to organizing our notes, you can organize notes in multiple ways. And I would like Yalcin, you can say like probably we both organize our notes in very different ways, and it worked for both of us. That's why it's PKM, personal knowledge management. But there are also the PKM mindsets, the things like how do we think about organizing our notes so that we can create them in our own way using different methods, different tools, and things like that. And when you start to talk about like having maybe different votes or not, the main question is actually how do we want to organize our knowledge itself? What becomes a note? For example, when Felipe talks about coding and knowledge, what is in a note? Let's say we can have code and knowledge in the same place. We can, and they are actually interlinked together. And as Yalcin, you said before, it's important that they are in the same tool so that they can actually connect them and make them work together and maybe extract new knowledge from that, right?
Yes, again, another complicated subject. Do I need a new vault or do I go with my existing vault? I agree for the short term. It will be much easier, more straightforward to go with the new vault. But my question is, does Felipe's existing vault not have anything to do with his dissertation? If the answer is it has a lot to do with his dissertation, he already has a lot of notes in his existing vault. Now he will have to carry all of those, select and carry all of those to the new vault, which is, I think, a duplication of work. And in the long run, it's not, to me, it's not the ideal way to go about it. So my preference would be stick to his existing vault, resist the temptation of starting from a clean slate if he can. Again, personal opinion. Again, I'm not an academician. Again, I didn't write a dissertation before, but that's my business perspective. But use, again, I think this, again, a little bit made me feel that namespaces is still a better way for him to go, because in the namespaces, you create a certain space for a single concept, and you nest every other page underneath that namespace. So within a vault, there is a selection of nodes that only belong to that namespace, which can make life easier for Felipe. He can use his existing nodes, but he can use those in the context of the single new namespace that he created in ROM research. That's my suggestion. Maybe he can look into this if he likes it. Maybe he doesn't like it. I don't know. But I think this is an alternative way to building a new vault from scratch.
Yeah, I agree, because I also like to, let's say, separate my notes. I use like Obsidian and Scrintel, and there are multiple ways, let's say, to separate our notes. One is like namespace or workspace in some tools, or even the use of tags. Tags can be very good actually to separate things. For example, in my case, I have this idea of the input notes, which are the notes which come from other people. Let's say notes about the information about a paper, or maybe reflections, which we'll talk in a minute as well, or all the things, the description of a data, a code that I got from somewhere. So all those things are input notes. And there is also what I call the knowledge notes, which are like, what are the insights? What is the knowledge that came from processing those inputs, of reading them or thinking about them? So that's actually my contribution. My knowledge notes is my contribution, where the input notes is what is already outside there. Because even if I create a note which has information that came from different papers, and I was the one to connect them, the connection between ideas from different places is actually a contribution as well. May not be a contribution where you can create a whole paper about it, but it's also a point that you contribute, is a connection that no one has made before. So by using tags, for example, we can, or namespace or whatever it is, we can actually separate the parts of our knowledge base in a way that is useful without the need to create a new space, right? Because then otherwise our knowledge itself gets fragmented. And when you talk about even tutorial notes or code or things like that, this is knowledge as well. This is a procedural knowledge, but knowledge nonetheless. So the main question is it an input or something that we got from somewhere? Or at least that's what I like to think. Or is it something that I'm developing myself that I need to communicate later as an output or output note? So I think like when you think about should we have it in one place or should we have it in multiple places, I would agree with you, Yalcin, that we should try as much as we can to have our knowledge into a single place and don't have it so bounded by a project, because a project finishes, right? But our knowledge continues and we can actually reuse and build on top of that. Right?
I agree.
So we're arriving at the top of time, so let's keep watching the last questions of Felipe.
Zotero to Rome, so I have the Zotero extension here. I don't actually need this here because I'm using Zotero here. So it basically works best with the papers. I've been organizing them in Rome and in Zotero, and that's actually something that I have in mind as well. So what's the best way to organize my Zotero data? Should I worry about the past papers that I had and then I'm not using right now because they were more of an exploration back when I was starting my thesis? Right now I'm on the finish line, so like I have a very clear idea of what I'm working on, and maybe a couple of the papers that I have in my Rome database are not as relevant right now as they once were when I was kind of picturing and idealizing what my thesis was going to be like. So this is kind of what it looks like right now. I didn't have the title author. I noticed it today, so I basically changed the metadata to include the title right now, and it makes it much better to visualize this query table. So this is one type of resource I have, and if I go inside the page, I basically have some notes and an inspection or reading for each paper, kind of what the most important things for me, some other questions that I wanted to answer. And right now, I think the most relevant way to apply this is here in my dissertation. So I'm gonna expand this. This is where I'm working at my kind of writing my text, and in here I'm gonna be thinking about things that I want to include in my text, and I'm gonna tag a paper. So from here I could open it on the sidebar and then grab a couple of notes and bring them into my thesis. That's the that's the goal. And I don't have any notes here right now, but I do have for other articles. And so I would basically be pulling things here to support my writing. And
so I think here's where I talk about the argument, because one thing that I see a lot of people when I talk about PKM in general is that the notes or our thoughts are trapped into files, right? We have, let's say, either a report and we write our notes inside the report, or our ideas are inside the dissertation. And when it comes to notes, the notes are like, oh, this is the project and everything goes into the project, or this is the paper and all those are ideas inside the paper. So our ideas are trapped into files. So the ideas are trapped inside the paper. So let's suppose we read, I don't know, 150 papers. So how can you find our ideas now? We need to check all the papers to think, oh, what was the paper that I read that again? And then to identify our ideas, to then pull it out, to try to write about them. So I find it hard. But I don't know, Yalcin, what's your perspective on that?
I totally agree with you. A lot of valuable wisdom is hidden, trapped inside documents, and I would love to set them free and make them useful in any way we can.
Mhm.
As for Felipe's question about Zotero, I think you are much better judge than I am on Zotero.
Yeah, this is the thing with Zotero, because Zotero will organize files, organize the papers, and then the notes will be indexed by the papers. So that's what Felipe will say. Well, I have maybe the papers there, and I grab my notes and I put in the dissertation. Whereas the other way around, as I was saying, like we create arguments, and the arguments are premises and the list of conclusion. So the idea is that what if we create our notes, and actually each note is a premise or is an idea itself, and then the body of the note is our explanation about their idea, or what is supporting evidence for their idea, or in which papers I have found that idea, or the quotes from different papers and my thoughts about that quote, how that quote supports or goes against that idea. So at the end, if we have our notes in that way, we are freeing our ideas, right? And then what we don't need to be thinking, should I have the paper itself in Zotero here? Because it doesn't really matter, The most important thing is the idea. And then in the idea, you can say, okay, this idea is there is a quote I got from here, and here is the link to wherever the paper is. Could be a folder in my system, could be in my Google Drive, could be in Zotero with all the bibliographic information, easy to take from there. So I think that's the most important thing, is for us to think, let's say, in terms of an argument, so that each note is a piece of that argument and all the relevant information to support the truth or the validity, depending on which part of the argument you are working. And then we create our network of ideas. Our PKM is really our network of ideas. And then that's one question that I have, Yalcin, because we can see from Felipe's screen that he actually have a Zettelkasten. And a Zettelkasten is a little bit of that, which there are pieces of ideas, let's say, that we just put them together. So my question maybe for Felipe to reflect on is why not using the Zettelkasten and actually having the notes inside Zotero? So wouldn't it be better to actually use a Zettelkasten for that, where, of course, Zettelkasten is a little bit different from what I just explained, but I'm not sure.
It is possible. Definitely, it is possible. Worth looking into, Bianca, because he already has. Having a Zettelkasten means that he has spent a lot of time into categorizing or in some way linking many of his existing thoughts, which is information he will probably be using in his dissertation in one way or another, in one location or another. So there is always value of making use of his existing setups as much as he can. That's a good idea, a good suggestion, actually. I agree.
Okay, so then let's see what else we can learn from Felipe.
I'm not sure if I'm have a good idea that I will create a new ROM database where I will have these two things, so like all of the Zotero data and the papers and the writing for my thesis. So I'm probably going to create a page for each of the individual sections here when I'm actually writing my text in order to see the graph view better. So yeah, that's one question. So like I have a moving on, it's basically what should I bring over from the things that I have here right now, because I have this page with a couple of reflections and things that I talked with my supervisor, with other reflections that I have, my presentation proposal and different reflections that I had on that. So I'm not sure how to bring things over, if I should bring them over or if I should just use the new database for actually working on my thesis with kind of papers and purely academic information, not my reflections and thoughts.
Yeah, just stop it to. I just saw that Felipe is with us today here. So, Felipe, actually like your idea of having namespace. So, say namespace looked like a great alternative, and he will be exploring a little bit more how we can use namespace. So, for everyone who is listening, if Felipe is willing to share with us again what he has learned about namespaces, maybe in a few weeks, that would be really cool. So, watch on Twitter. We'll be talking about it there. And he actually is thinking also about using the idea of Zettelkasten for the ideas and content of the dissertation. So I really hope you do. It is Zettelkasten, or at least have this idea of like each note is an idea. Of course, like you're dealing with blocks, so the idea of note is slightly different. But then with blocks, it's much easier to organize Zettelkasten, because then you have more the idea of threads, let's say. So it really depends on what methodology works best for your own use case. And yeah, as I talk about the reflections, should my reflections be part of my research database? That's a hard question, I would say, because the reflections and decisions are as important as factual knowledge when writing the thesis or the dissertation. And then because at some point we need to justify why our work went into a given direction, not in another direction, right? So having, let's say, a decision journal, for instance, or at least some general reflections about the project is really important. So having said that, it's hard to say without knowing exactly how the notes look like or how useful they are to your own use case, if they should be in the same space or not. But as like you can always separate from other notes by giving them an identifier that can allow you to separate a tag or something else. So I would say, Yalcin, what do you think about having reflections together with the work itself?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think ROM, as well as similar ROM-based tools like Logseq, etc., are very good tools to have some reflections on a function called daily notes, journals. Like you can enter anything in the daily notes, reflections being being either to be used or not to be used in the project itself. So what you reflect in the daily notes are reflections that you take out from your work, from the dissertation paper, from some thoughts, from any other wisdom that you are trying to integrate in your head. But it's then up to you to decide if you are going to use it in your end product or not. So reflections are very important because it's the way our mind thinks. And I think the main function of ROM-like tools is that it centers you into a journal, into a daily note, so that you can write whatever you have in your mind, be it relevant or irrelevant to the task that you're working right now. So I think Felipe is in the right spot about using some portion of that reflections in his end product, Bianca.
Yeah, and then
I think he'll come out very strong on this one. I really trust Felipe in this.
Me too. I really like the presentation, the showcase of his PKM. Maybe we can have just a few less comments because we are really on time today.
Yes.
For example, one of the other things that he have procedures for some the code itself. Should it be the same space? Should it be in a different space? I think, like as we saw before, like same graph help linking ideas, right? And one of the things that actually I want to add here maybe is that there are ways where you can separate ideas if you need them, let's say tags, but there are also ways how we can cluster ideas together. Let's say, as I was talking, like in his case, there are blocks, but then you have a premise, and then you want to actually cluster all the things that support that premise. And I like the way how he created the galaxy page earlier on. Remember that he had the galaxy and all the stars. So that's actually a way to aggregate. It's almost like a maps of content where they're actually aggregating all the similar ideas together so that they can rearrange them, reorganize them. So that's maybe one of the things to think about as well.
I agree. I really like the way he works. I'm pretty sure he'll come out very strong. I'm pretty sure his dissertation will be, as you said, building a strong argument. I'm really I don't have any further comments to what we have just discussed. I think we have discussed a lot, Bianca, today. So I'm really happy that he preferred to, and he decided to share it with us. And I'm really happy to have gone over it with you.
Yeah. As I say, I find I can spend like hours discussing personal knowledge management, but as I say, our time is up, so we may need to conclude here. So I want to say as well, like Felipe, I also want to do an invitation live, okay, to you here. I would really love to have you as part of the beta group for my upcoming course on PKM for research, because the questions that you brought to us here today, they're exactly the type of things that I will be covering, exactly the type of things that I want to know more what struggles that everyone have. And the beta group itself, which is the cohort 1, let's say, is also a special group to me because it's not just going through the curriculum, but I want to personally guarantee that the individual success of each student. So really, this is my public invitation to you. I really would like to have it there. And I think you can just catch up on Twitter to talk a little bit more about it if you have interest on that. So I want to leave here my public invitation. So I think this was a lot of fun. I always get really excited talking about productivity, knowledge management, methodologies. And I hope you really enjoy Yalcin. So how you think it was today?
I really enjoyed it. I liked it very much. Thank you for inviting me, Bianca.
Oh, thanks a lot for accepting, for taking the time. And I think one thing to remind everyone who is watching us today is that something we don't appreciate enough when looking at PKM frameworks or try to learn from other people is a personal part of it. That each person needs to tailor the system to their own needs. It's not just like take someone else and apply, because you still need to see, is it the way how I think, is it the way that I like to work? So I would say thanks a lot, Felipe, for letting us learn a bit about your PKM system as you are building it. And thanks a lot for your question. I think everyone can learn a little bit what they can maybe borrow to their own PKM systems. And it was fun. I definitely want to do it again. So I would like to invite anyone who is watching us today, if you would like to have a live commentary of your PKM for research system, you know how it looks like. So you can just contact me on Twitter. If you want to also maybe like chat with Yalcin and know a little bit more about his PKM coach, please feel free to contact us. Here we have the QR code. Just send me a DM and we'll talk. You take it from there if you want to be live with us in the next months. Again, thank you, Yalcin. Thanks a lot for being here today. Like, I really, really appreciate your time, your comments, and I think there is a lot for us to chat about, right?
Thank you, Bianca, and good luck, Felipe.
Yeah. So thank you very much for everyone joining us today. So let's keep chatting on Twitter. So talk soon.